Creativity, the idea of using your own imagination, exposing it, executing it. Creativity is a very human aspect, and we are constantly surrounded by the idea of design. We see it through many different mediums, from advertising, artwork, and graffiti. We see it where we go, and even when we make our own rendition of creativity. It is a source of inspiration, and the human mind perceives the idea of creativity in their own unique way. Human contact and creativity is and has been a strong link between the two, creating art, conjuring literature, and developing forms of music in the vast existence of our history. But what is creativity without human nature? Set with a code and algorithm, technology has an advantage and the ability to execute any given task. We see this with touchscreen, self-service kiosks, virtual assistants, and even predictive text. Even gone as far to create the fear as a question, can such learning algorithms, like artificial intelligence, replace humans? Creativity without human nature is possible. It can be done by an algorithm with a certain input, with the right information and the given context. An algorithm has the ability to generate its own interpretation of what it has been asked for. This process is called generative art. The idea of something being generative can apply to the natural world, from the barks of a tree to the branches drifting in the wind and a crack upon the surface. These very principles have no given correlation to imitate. It's all just random, but yet with a strict rule, like the lines of the bark on any plotted tree, they look similar, but with each having a different rhythm. This function can be replicated through machinery, allowing something with a strict rule, but the freedom to have no given correlation to imitate. On first observation, pieces of work that are generative art are all very random, with each piece being unique as the previous one was. No form of this is ever the same. The input will remain intact, but the output will always be a different combination based on the input, which is where the idea of something being random comes from. You, as the inputter, have no control over what will be deemed as the output. It is out of your reign, out of control. Initially, the idea of generative art wasn't executed until the 1960s, but with strong influences from the art movement, Futurism, that style visualized the dynamic nature and energy using shapes to capture movement and expressing the idea of a modern life whilst using elements of Neo-Impressionism and Cubism, as well as the influences of Constructivism, focusing on the industrial elements, using geometric shapes and pinpointing on industrial production. These movements both have a fascination with the idea of technology and machinery. As technology was adapting with the time, modern computers became accessible and were introduced to the commercial side, thus allowing people to operate the systems and to experiment with the machinery. The home computer, though, was often used to create databases for shopping, to act as a function to make life a bit easier, or to play games. But in a unique function, one of the ways the computer was used had one individual combining their creativity and the computer together. But to depict creativity through machinery has been an ongoing process since the start of it, being executed through different sets, styles, and languages. One obscure example of this is the Game of Life, developed in the 1970s by John Horton Conway, using the cellular automaton model, a function using a specific grid with cells going on and off. The Game of Life is considered a zero-player game, with the idea for cells evolving on its own. With one cell interacting with another, it creates a connection, and you see the imitation of life, creating a generated set of movement and rhythm, showcasing the absolute of no control in terms of the output. With this model, it is possible to create elements like Conway's Game of Life, but with different context and maintaining the idea of observation through a generated situation. Steering to the world of design, a high amount of evidentiary pieces done by different sets of algorithms and outputs create a unique look upon the definition of design. But reminiscent on the origins of generated art, ode to construction, an abstract look reflecting on the idea of the art movement of the same subject through generative code, which investigates the visual style and reflection of the early 20th century constructivism movement. To convey the idea and spirit of this through the created algorithm, Paulina Joff designed the code for it to focus and visually capture the abstract nature of the art movement through a set of red and black rectangles, but with different scale and movement, all randomly generated by the code. Being described as the next step of the subject matter, one aspect of generated art is GANs, or Generative Adversarial Network, developed in 2014 by MIT graduate Ian Goodfellow. Through learning what it's been given, a GAN is where two neural networks, where one contains data, which happens to be a form of imagery, and a counter network incorporates an outcome. The results of this are eerily engaging, using photorealistic elements, conjuring evidence from the given dataset and creating an entirely different content. In this case, people, no matter the race, age, or gender, it creates something entirely new. But with the results and spending time looking at each of the faces, you begin to notice a certain similarity between the infinite amount of them. One main feature being that the eyes are always in the same composition, and inevitably, if you combine all the faces together, they resemble the same structure. But this can apply to other things like cats, cars, cities, and even an Airbnb. One argument that is said about the method of art through the computer is that, is it even considered as art? With only the input being conjured by the individual behind the algorithm, it's initially the computer that's using the tool to create the outcomes. This applies to generative art and even digital art, for the digital tools allow an advantage over a traditional canvas, creating the debate of what constitutes as art. In 2019, one piece virally sparked this very question, with the purpose of it to do exactly that. Italian artist Maurizio Cattelan, who is highly known for his sculptures, which challenges the limits of the contemporary values systems, produced The Comedian, an ironic piece which is basically a banana duct taped on a wall, but yet reminiscent of one influential piece from 102 years prior to The Comedian. The same question once been argued against the theme of Dadaism, much like Marcel Duchamp, with one piece that changed the concept of art. This piece being the fountain, essentially being a urinal with R.Mut 1917 written on it. Duchamp put the fountain under the title of Ready-Mades. Being known for this series, ready-mades are the category of pieces consisting of various items already existing to be modified or recontextualized to function as works of art. Essentially bringing something that had a different context and creating a new meaning for it. That meaning being a concept of art. With a certain input, with the right information, and the given context, an algorithm has the ability to generate its own modified or recontextualized function and abilities as an output, being perceived as a form of art. The algorithm allows the computer to function. The majority of technology is built upon an algorithm, but like humans, it perceives creativity through its own unique